Get softer, smoother, and more even-toned skin after just one use with the new Gentle Exfoliating line from Cetaphil. Formulated with a unique triple acid blend that promotes surface skin cell renewal, these gentle chemical exfoliators remove dead skin cells and refine skin's texture while hydrating, resulting in softer, smoother, more even-looking skin. Shop the new Cetaphil Gentle Exfoliating line in the face and body aisles at your local Target store or online at Cetaphil.com.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hi, everyone, and welcome on in to another edition of Eye on the Enemy, part of the Eagles Pin Pull Network. I'm your host, John Stolnis. I'm a writer for BleedingGreenNation.com. You can follow me on the X at John Stolnis. And coming up, we're going to preview this game, this suddenly important and contestable game between the Eagles and the New Orleans Saints with Wesley Coleman. He's the host of the Dome Patrol podcast. He'll give us his insight onto why the Saints have gotten off to such an amazing start offensively here in 2024, and can they keep it up? What can the Eagles do to stop this sudden juggernaut? Will they keep it up? Will the Saints be able to maintain the pace that they are at? We're going to discuss all that stuff with Wesley coming up here in the next few minutes of Eye on the Enemy. But before we do that, let's just give you some of the latest news heading into action here as we record this on Friday afternoon. A.J. Brown likely to be out for this game with the hamstring injury, meaning Jahan Dotson will get the majority of the number 2 receiver reps. We're also likely to see a lot of Britton Covey again in the slot. Paris Campbell will be elevated from the practice squad, one would imagine, which is why I think we're going to see more 2 tight end sets, a lot of ball control. We haven't seen Dallas Goedert become a featured part of this offense in what seems like over a year. And I'm wondering, is he cooked? Is he good? And Jalen Hurts doesn't want to throw his way. He doesn't think he can make the throws. He doesn't trust to throw in the tighter windows. I mean, he's not going to get as much separation as A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith do, and maybe that's what Hurts is more comfortable doing. But Dallas Goedert is, last I checked, a top 5 tight end in this league, and they just cannot seem to get him involved in the offense. My hope was that Kellen Moore, as the offensive coordinator, would find ways to utilize the tight ends, and especially with A.J. Brown out, you would think that Dallas Goedert would get some more action, but just not seeing many targets. There's no way Britton Covey should be targeted more than Dallas Goedert with A.J. Brown on the sidelines. One other injury to note, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, CJGJ. That's why we always say CJGJ, because that name's a mouthful. He could be out for this game as well. We're gonna continue to wait and see. We haven't heard about practice on Friday just yet. But if he is out of the game, you're looking at Avonte Maddox likely sliding into the starting safety spot, and then we could get to see Cooper DeJean as the new starting nickel. Vic Fangio told us this week that he is the backup nickel cornerback, and so it'd be fun to see Cooper DeJean in the lineup, but we'll see how this all shakes out over the weekend with the injury report, and hopefully no one else gets added to it. Would be nice to see a player or 2 subtracted from it. And real quick, before I get to my interview with Wesley Coleman here, before we talk to Wesley, I do just want to briefly, and because we've talked about this, the Philadelphia region has talked about Nick Sirianni's decision-making at the end of the game ad nauseum, and I've said a lot about it on X. I'm not going to say a whole lot about it right now, but I'll kind of give a more of a bigger picture type look, and just ask yourself, what edge does Nick Sirianni give this Eagles team right now as the head coach? And you have to wonder, after these decisions at the end of the game on Monday night and how they backfired, how hot is the hot seat that was already pretty warm coming into the season? I think the thing that's most startling about those decisions is that none of them make sense when you put them all together. In isolation, each one of those decisions probably you could make an argument for. But when taken together, it shows no continuity of thought, no continuity of system, no continuity of what is it? What is it that we do here? What is our image? What is our what is the thing we hang our hat on? There's a word I'm trying to grope for, and I can't find it. I'm sure you all are screaming it at me as you listen to the podcast. What is our identity? That's what I'm trying to say. Are we an aggressive team? The Eagles have always been an aggressive team. They do go for it on fourth down a lot, but in some of these big situations, they haven't been. So you go for it on 4th and 4 in the first quarter, but you don't go for it on 4th and 3 with 1:30 left, and the Falcons pinned deep in their own territory. Those two things don't make a whole lot of sense. You refuse the offside. Here's the big one to me. When you have a 3rd and short there, the Saints jump off sides on purpose so that the Eagles could take the penalty and get the first down. But if you do that, then it allows the Saints to stop the clock after the first down, the second down, and the third down. Whereas if the Eagles, when they were getting ready to do the tush push or whatever it was on third down to get it, you make them take a timeout before the first down, leaving them basically you're costing them 40 extra seconds by refusing the offside penalty. And in that moment, Nick Sirianni was making the correct call to refuse the offsides penalty. We were giving him all the credit in the world, right? Saying, no, that's the smart play because the clock is your most important ally in this moment. Once that clock hits 00, the Saints can't do a thing. The Falcons can't do a thing with the football. They can't do a thing with it. And so you refuse the offsides penalty that the Saints tried to give you because you understand, Nick Sirianni understood that the most important thing in that situation is to run clock. Make them chew up their timeouts, run the clock, get it down as low as you can, and then do whatever it is you're going to do on fourth down, whether it's kick a field goal or go for it. So throwing it on 3rd and 3, no matter how sure-handed the receiver is, and Saquon Barkley has never been, he's had his drop issues, but even putting that aside, even if the receiver is the most sure-handed receiver in football, anytime you put the ball in the air, you run the risk of that ball hitting the ground. You run the risk of a wind gust. You run the risk of your best player, your best offensive player outside of A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts dropping an easy pass. It's just not a chance you can take. And yes, it can be the perfect play call. It was the perfect play call. In any other time of the game, it would have been a brilliant play call that just didn't work out. But in that moment, running the clock and guaranteeing yourself running the clock was more important than risking stopping the clock to try and go for a first down there. And I know that the Eagles have gone for it, have thrown the ball in other situations. The previous week against the Packers, they did that a couple of different times on the final drive, and it worked out. But, I mean, it's still risky. And in this particular case, Saquon Barkley was running the ball effectively. Even if they're loading the box, you like Saquon's chances of getting at least a yard or 2 yards to get you into a tush push situation. And then if you don't get it on fourth down, you still pin the Falcons back deep in their own territory. Like this is even putting aside the fourth down decision. But once you decide to throw it on third down, then don't you have to go for it on fourth down? But Sirianni, just none of these decisions made sense. Throwing it after refusing the offsides penalty, you basically just negated what you did there. Because the whole idea was to get them to use all their timeouts and run that clock down. To get that extra down, that extra 40 seconds between that third down and that fourth down before whatever it is you would decide to do there, whether it's kick the field goal or whether it's go for it. So to refuse that penalty and then to essentially just throw that decision away by throwing the football, yes, I'm sure he thought it was a guarantee that he would catch the football and get the first down. And I hear people saying, well, what if Saquon fumbled running the football? Well, I'm telling you what, there is a higher risk for an incompletion than there is somebody fumbling the football. What if Jalen Hurts short-armed to throw? What if the ball slips out of his hands? What if he accidentally throws it into the ground or overthrows his receiver and it's not a drop? There are so many things that can go wrong on even a simple pass play like that. The number of things that can go wrong on a pass play like that far outweigh the number of things that can go wrong if you just hand the ball off to Saquon and he runs it up the middle. But even more than that, there was no clarity, there was no consistency of thought or game plan there from Nick Sirianni, and that's the big problem that I have with that move. You know, and I will say I have now come around on thinking that the Eagles should have gone for it on fourth down. And one of the things, when they kicked the field goal, I was like, yes, kick the field goal, make them score a touchdown to beat you, instead of just getting into field goal range to tie you and send you to overtime. Now they can't kick the field goal. Now they've got to get it in the end zone. And I didn't think the Eagles defense would allow them to do what they did. But the argument for not kicking the field goal there was, unless you're going to make it more than a one-score game, kicking the field goal still gives the Falcons a chance to score at the end of the game. And now what you've done is you've taken away any thoughts they might have of playing it safe, of just going for a field goal, kicking a field goal to send you into overtime, where you still, as the Eagles, have a 50-50 chance of winning the football game. If you go up 6, now you are forcing the Falcons to try and score a touchdown. You're forcing them to be aggressive. You take all of the indecision away from them. All of the, what should we do? Should we do this? Should we do that? And then all of a sudden, the certainty goes away. You know your game plan, and the Falcons went out and executed their game plan on that final drive, and the Eagles absolutely peed in the bed. And you have a loss. A lot of bad decisions at the end of the game. So now the hot seat on Nick Sirianni is definitely a lot warmer here going into week 3. If he doesn't get this team on some kind of a roll, I don't know that he makes it through the end of the season, because this is one of those things that Jeffrey Lurie has preached for a long time. Like, we look at the math. We don't let you don't going to go with your gut on these calls. We have numbers that tell us what we should do in these certain situations. And Nick Sirianni flew in the face of those things because he thought he knew best, and he was wrong. And he does not have the credibility. He doesn't have the credit saved up. He doesn't have the political capital saved up to buck the trends like this and be wrong. And so that's the risk he runs. And I didn't buy his explanation after, on Monday, where he's talking about, we looked after the fact and we found all these different things. I think that's terrible. Going after the fact, trying to support your decision with other past situations like that and how they worked out. No, you either have conviction of thought or you don't. Don't do that thing where, you made a call and it's like, well, I got to go try and find some stuff to support what I did. That to me is a guy who's not secure. That to me is a guy who is trying to justify to his owner, here's why I did what I did, and see if you buy this. But I don't think anybody, including Jeffrey Lurie, was buying it. Well, and joining me to help break down this game between the Eagles and Saints, suddenly a game on the schedule for the Eagles that feels more like a potential loss than it did at the start of the season. Wesley Coleman, he's with the Dome Patrol podcast. You want to learn a lot about the Saints? Check that podcast out. Of course, you can follow him on X, Twitter, whatever you call it, at who.wesley13. Wesley, thanks for joining me here on Eye on the Enemy. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, John. Exciting. I think that I probably feel differently than I did a couple of weeks ago, too. I think we probably both reversed our roles a little bit of what we thought this game would be like.
Yeah, I mean, it really, after watching what the Saints have done the first couple of weeks, and, the Eagles' 2 uneven performances here through the first couple of weeks of the season, this suddenly has become a more daunting matchup as far as I'm concerned. And, it's a shock watching the Saints put up the kinds of points that they have over the first couple of weeks. I mean, they go nuts on the Panthers, which you're like, okay, that's understandable. Week ones are weird too, so okay. But then they do what they did to the Cowboys. Thanks very much, by the way. That was as enjoyable a watch as I can remember. But to watch them put up over 40 on the Cowboys, to make it 2 straight weeks over 40 points, it's a surprise, obviously. And we know that there's a new offensive coordinator there. Can you just talk a little bit about the new OC and kind of what it is that he has done through the first 2 games that has really got this Saints offense humming?
Sure. And it's surprising to us too. And you're talking about 91 points in the first 2 weeks. You're in historic numbers in the top 5 in the history of football. So when you start talking about weird things like that, yeah, it's definitely abnormal and people need to pay attention. It's not just a 1-week fluke anymore. And so, yeah, we've got Clint Kubiak that came in as our offensive coordinator. We hired him from the 49ers, of course, with the Shanahan Kubiak tree, which seems to have success no matter where their offense is and how talented the quarterback is.
Yeah.
I've never been a big Brock Purdy guy, but he's in a system that makes him look really good. And if you take somebody like Derek Carr, who's middle of the road quarterback, can sometimes can look like a top 10 barely guy, but a lot of times just sit there in the middle. You take a guy talented like that and you get him to buy into your system, it does work. We've just got an offense that keeps everybody off balance. The defense has no idea how to attack. Our approach and alignments in week 1 against the Panthers, we used quite a few 3 wide receiver sets. We did not at the Cowboys hardly at all. We used a lot of 2 running back and 2 tight end sets. It makes it really hard for the defense to set what they're going to do. And I think the Saints make it harder than some other teams would. We have Taysom Hill, who lines up in 4 different places. Wherever he lines up, there's 2 or 3 defenders yelling out, Taysom's over there. And then someone else goes in motion. Let's say Rashid Shaheed, who's super fast, could run a post, could get a 70-yard touchdown, could be handed the ball, could be tossed the ball, could get a sweep or a screen. So he goes moving, and 2 or 3 people, their eyes go with him, and they start yelling, Rashid Shaheed's going that way.
Yeah.
And so you've got half the defense already distracted, not focused, before the ball's even snapped. And it's worked out, better than any of us necessarily thought it would.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Derek Carr, I've always, I've never been a big Derek Carr guy. He's had talent in different places. You have Devontae Adams when you're with the Raiders. You expect him to do some good things, but the Raiders are always kind of a mess. And then it's just, I don't know. It's one of those things where I never came in. Certainly nobody came into this season thinking Derek Carr is going to light the world on fire, but I really appreciate how in the first game, like you're saying, they ran 3 wide receivers a lot. And then in the second game, they didn't do any of that. And that's, I think, as people get more tape on the Saints, certainly they're going to run into some more obstacles. Defenses are going to catch on. But early in the season, that's what scares me right now is there's not a whole lot of tape on this team. And, there is some talent on this roster. Chris Olave can play. Alvin Kamara jumped into the Wayback Machine the last couple of weeks, and he's looked unstoppable. And that's the guy that worries me the most right now, given how the Eagles have allowed running backs to gash them so far here in the first couple weeks of the season. What's Kamara doing differently? How are they utilizing him that he's been able to kind of burst onto the scene again?
Yeah, and I would say there's been a lot of misuse of him over the last few years since Sean Payton left. And if anything, Pete Carmichael has taken Alvin Kamara out of Hall of Fame consideration of where he was headed with his career and the numbers he was going to compile. And I'm not sure if there's enough time left to get him back in that discussion, but he's going to look like it for a couple of seasons. With his balance, his ability to catch the ball, there's a lot of comparisons that are correct between him and somebody like Christian McCaffrey. And if honestly, Kamara has even better balance than Christian McCaffrey for stretching things out to the side and then cutting back. He's just being put in a position to win. And 100%. Listen, we've got some talented guys. Rashid Shaheed is good at some things. Derek Carr can be good at some things. Chris Olave is good at some things, but the coaching staff is coaching all these players and putting them in a position to be successful. And it's also putting I would say an offensive line that we didn't have a lot of faith in going in the season. He is scheming ways to make some of the deficient offensive linemen play just fine. And win reps against Tank Lawrence and Micah Parsons and some of the best pass rushers in the game. There is some talent. There is a lot of talent on the coaching staff and what they're doing offensively and defensively.
It's amazing how much coaching matters in the NFL. We saw it last year with the Eagles, how the coaching staff really single-handedly killed a season, and we're not so sure that it's that it's a whole lot better here in 2024, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And you're talking about this offensive line having to deal with some really talented pass rushers. They're not going to have that issue here against the Eagles in Week 3, unfortunately. At least it doesn't look like. If what we've seen the first couple weeks is prologue, it's certainly going to be a struggle. And one of the things that I know the Saints have been doing a lot of, seeing a lot of screen game from them, really trying to get the ball out of Derek Carr. No one's come close to getting Derek Carr so far this year because it seems like the ball's just getting out so darn quick. What can the Eagles defense do? How do you stop that and get Derek Carr to have to hold on to the ball a little bit longer? Because it just seems like he's that back foot's hitting the ground and the ball is out.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, especially with, like you said, the way that we're playing the run. We scored 44 points on the Cowboys, who I'm telling you, once the season plays out, they're going to turn out to still be a good team. They're going to have double-digit wins. They're going to be a good defense. The Saints played them perfectly, and Derek Carr completed 11 passes in that game.
Yeah.
So honestly,
running game.
when we're able to run the ball at almost 6 yards a carry, you're going to bring your whip, and you're not going to be able to defend the pass against Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed and Alvin Kamara. It's just, I mean, at that point, it's not something you can do. The guys are too fast. They run too good of routes. And the system, the pre-snap motion just is too good. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's the perfect offense, or we're not going to go undefeated, but this early in the season, like you said, there hasn't been enough consistency for anybody to get tape and go, here's the thing I'm going to take away. And again, as long as there's health with those players that I'm talking about, there's always going to be a secondary way to go right now. Now, there's not a lot of depth to our team. So injuries would definitely be a problem anywhere that we would have it in offense. But as long as we stay healthy, this is it's a really good system. It's not a fluke that we've scored 91 points. And again, after the Panthers game, I agree. I was right there with you. I'm like, yeah, it was the Panthers. Now, don't get me wrong, 47 points is a ton of points.
That's a lot of points. It's a good showing.
Middle of the pack teams don't score 47 in a season ever.
Right.
But to watch it against the Cowboys, I mean, I do actually have a lot of faith that this is something that can be sustained with health.
So if you're you're sitting in your office, if you're Kubiak and you're looking at this Eagles defense and you've seen what you've seen the first couple of weeks, are you kind of following the same philosophy as last week? You're gonna run the football. You're gonna run Alvin Kamara on this team, force them to bring guys in the box, and then who knows, even if the guys they bring in the box can tackle, because that's not the strength of this Philadelphia Eagles defense. But I say that I don't know what the strength of this Eagles defense is. We're pretty down on this Eagles defense right now, Wesley, because they have played like the worst unit in the NFL right now. But how are you attacking this defense?
Yeah, I mean, I could see going with the exact same game plan as last week, just going, this isn't a team up front that can stop the run. Mm-hmm. So, like, let's play bully ball. I think they really liked being able to bully the Cowboys last week. Having said that, I think there'll be more passes in this game than against the Cowboys. I think that we will throw the ball more than 16 times, just because I think a lot of that was designed around the Cowboys because of the fear from the pass rush that we're just not going to have against the Eagles. So I think they will feel a little more comfortable throwing the ball. I think the tight ends are going to be utilized as pass catchers instead of blockers. They did a great job run blocking. Jawan Johnson and Foster Moreau were incredible last week. I think that you see, I think you still see a lot of running the ball. And the thing that the Saints have done consistently in the first two games is ran the ball on third down, regardless of the down and distance. 3rd and 2, they're running. 3rd and 7, they might be running too. And we've even ran the ball on 3rd and 10, because to throw you off to where you truly do not have a way to set your feet and know what's coming.
And I think through the first couple of weeks, we've seen that a lot of defenses have really decided we're not giving up the big play. They're doing a lot of, I know, who was it? Was it the Mel Kiper, who was talking about they need to outlaw two high safeties. The idea is just run the football, guys. And that seems, I think that's kind of played out a little bit over the first couple of weeks is, teams are playing really conservative. They're trying to prevent teams from beating them over the top, and teams are just content to take the short passes and run the football. It was kind of the Eagles game plan last week with A.J. Brown out, and I would make a whole lot of sense for the Saints to do the same thing, because I don't think you're going to see anything different from the Eagles here on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the team that shouldn't have done it was the Falcons. They should have just kept running the ball against y'all last week. It was crazy the way they – and then when y'all switch at the end of the game, y'all switch to the two high safety and give up – they just drive all the way down the field. And I mean, again, I wanted y'all to pay us back and beat the Falcons since we beat the Cowboys for you. And that would have set up everybody be talking about this game. And they are. This is probably still the game of the week, if you're being honest. At least because of the Eagles' expectations coming into the season. But if we're both 2-0, this game's getting even more talked about than it is, and we're all having a lot more fun. Believe me, we wanted you to win and go into this game 2-0 as well. I
want to talk to you about the division when we're done talking about this game specifically, because all of a sudden I think the NFC South is pretty interesting. But let's flip the side of the field here and let's talk about Saints defense. Again, I think the Eagles offense without A.J. Brown, I think we saw what they're going to do. They're going to rely heavily on the running ability of Saquon Barkley, who looked really good. Jalen Hurts, and this was one of the really positive takeaways from the Eagles game on Monday night. Jalen Hurts looked like 2002 Jalen Hurts running the football.
He could run again.
Yeah, he didn't have that escapability. He didn't have that ability to get around the corner and have guys miss, and he didn't have the ability to barrel through guys the way he did. Maybe it was just a want to this time around as opposed to last year, but I felt like he didn't come into the season as physically ready as he had in 2022. So that was encouraging to see. And so that factors into the RPO game. You know, when you're not worried about Jalen Hurts as a runner, you don't care if he tucks it. You're zoning in on the running back. And I think right now, if you're the Saints defense, how are you playing the RPO given what you just saw from Jalen Hurts? How much more difficult is this Eagles offense to game plan for?
Yeah, I mean, well, specifically for the Saints, this is something that we're terrible at is running quarterbacks. It's always been the kryptonite for the Saints. In fact, the Saints for years didn't give up a 100-yard rusher until the Eagles a couple of years ago. You get two in the same game that I won't forget, and it was terrible. Having said that, this year I think that they're built a little bit better to deal with that. Alontae Taylor, who's been playing a lot of nickel cornerback, has really improved his tackling. He's made quite a few tackles last week around the edge. And then we brought in Willie Gay Jr., who's really like our third linebacker, who's not playing as many snaps as Demario Davis or Pete Werner, but super fast. And I do expect to see Willie Gay Jr. getting more snaps in this game. I don't think that we're going to spy Jalen Hurts or anything like that. But I think that the thing is going to be is we're going to look at a shortcut with y'all having A.J. Brown. There's kind of a shortcut to making you one-dimensional. Mm-hmm. And then once we do make you one-dimensional, we're not really scared of the pass. I think there's going to be some pressure on Hurts. There's going to be some blitzes. Alontae Taylor had 3 sacks in week 1. Again, that's Bryce Young, who's going to hold the ball a little bit longer than maybe Jalen Hurts. But I think there's going to be some pressure there. And again, if the Saints offense is scoring, that also it makes it hard to where you guys can't run the ball. You got to throw the ball if you're down a couple touchdowns. So it's all going to play in together, but there's a route. If we have a first quarter like we did in the first 2 weeks, it does make it really difficult on the Eagles to score points while wanting to run the ball 70% of the time.
Right. It's imperative for the Eagles to keep this game close and not let the Saints get out to a big lead because they don't have the home run hitter. I mean, Devontae Smith can play. There's no doubt about it. But, I mean, you've got Marshawn Lattimore back there. It's a correct me if I'm wrong, pretty decent Saints secondary, right? I mean, they're not going to at least historically it has been. But what is it what's the current status of the secondary right now?
It's the strength of the entire team. The strongest unit on our team is our secondary. So Lattimore didn't even play last week against the Cowboys. And Kool-Aid McKinstry and Alontae Taylor stepped up and paired with Paulson Adebo to the Cowboys had to throw the ball the entire game, and they stepped up to stop them. You still got Tyrann Mathieu on the back end, who's just an incredible veteran who does have an interception in both of the first 2 games, or a fumble recovery and an interception in the first 2 games. And then we have another Will Harris Jr., who's a young player that's been playing the safety position next to him. But those 5 or 6 guys, if they've been rotated in, have looked great. It's one thing the Saints have had as a strength for years is to bring in cornerbacks and draft later and see cornerbacks that can come in and be successful. CJ Gardner-Johnson was a later mid-round pick for the Saints that put him in a position for him to demand a lot of money and get traded.
Right.
But that is the strength of the team. So if we get any kind of pass rush from Carl Granderson and Chase Young, it really helps those defensive backs who can guard for a while. But if they force the ball out quick, I mean, that's where the turnovers have come from. That we've already had 3 interceptions and a couple of fumbles.
So if you're the Eagles offense, how do you attack this Saints defense? Where's the soft underbelly?
You've got to. I think Saquon Barkley is the best running back in football, period. Unfortunately, it's generally for 3.5 games a season until he gets hurt.
Yeah.
And I'm not meaning that disrespectful way. I think he's so talented. I like to watch him play. I think it's really dumb to throw passes to him on 4th down.
No, it was I'm glad to hear you say that. Dumbest play call. I mean, it was a third down play, but the clock is the most important part there. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Since he entered the league, he has more drop passes than any running back in the NFL.
Well, there you go.
I mean, you just don't do it there. But I think that you count on him to just be better than, it doesn't matter if we put 8 in the box. If he can be that running back, you at least have to, that has to be your first shot, is just hoping that you can sustain drives, hold the ball, because even if you get back into a quick hitter back and forth scoring matchup, I don't think that works out well for you. You've got to really shorten the team. And then you got to, I mean, Derek Carr will throw an interception. Like you've got to hope for a mistake by keeping the game close. But I think shortening the game by running Saquon is imperative for you.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I would really like to see this Eagles team get Dallas Goedert more involved. I haven't been able to break out like all 22 tapes and see like where are his roots? Is he getting open? Is he ignored? Like, I mean, this is a guy who I think is a top 5 tight end in football, and it just seems like week in and week out, he's invisible.
Yeah, that's such a surprise for a guy that was successful for a few years and looked like, him and Mark Andrews were supposed to be there neck and neck, and right behind Travis Kelce, and he's just non-existent now. He's not even a thought in fantasy football now. It doesn't even come up as a tight end that you should draft. So that's a big fall from grace. And you just have to think with the wear and tear of the tight end position that, those don't have as long of careers. And he may just be slowing down and not getting open.
Like I'm looking for somebody to do like a deep dive into that, and because I'm very curious to see what the Dallas Goedert tape looks like. And obviously it's still early in the season, and we say all of this understanding that it's still very early in the season, and lots of things can change after just 2 weeks. I did want to talk to you very quickly about the division itself. The NFC South, the Buccaneers have looked amazing through the first couple of weeks. They really look like a solid football team. The Saints obviously are off to a hot start. I think the Falcons, if they can get some of their issues figured out, they have a lot of talent. But right now, I think they're probably number 3 behind the Saints and Buccaneers. This was a division that, generally speaking, historically, you're lucky to get one playoff team in. It's some of these divisions have been won with 9 wins, and this looks like an improved division this year. How much better do you feel like the South is in 2024?
Yeah, it's early for me to buy into any of that. I'm not a big believer in the Falcons. I don't think they made good coaching hires, and I don't think they made good decisions with either one of their quarterback decisions that they made. I don't think it's going to end up being looked at as a good decision even by the end of this season. They've done a weird job of how they've put together a team of players and coaches that I don't see working together. So that one's I don't know how much I believe in the Falcons. And again, this stuff with the Saints is, I think it's real, because what we've seen in 2 weeks is not a fantasy. Like they've been legitimate, but it's still new for me because 3 weeks ago I didn't believe it. And I want to see the Buccaneers some more. They play the Commanders, who I think are one of the worst defenses in football, and they put 37 on them. And then the Lions haven't looked good in either one of their two games. So I think everybody's got some questions still to answer. And I think it's pretty interesting for Derek Carr and Baker Mayfield to be the 2 lead candidates for MVP right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think either one of them is going to be in the top 3, conversation at the end of the year. So I am trying to be excited, and I do like what the Saints are doing. I think it's real. I think that they do now look like a double-digit win team. It's also week 2, so I am trying to temper what's going on before buying into anybody. I still don't think it's necessarily. I think it's always been a 1-team division. I just now think it maybe has switched from the Bucs to the Saints, but we'll definitely see as the season gets longer.
Well, it's the 2-0 Saints against the 1-1 Eagles. It's nice to play on a Sunday for a change. The Eagles start off in Brazil, and then they have to play Monday Night Football, and it's a short turnaround week. So I know that's also kind of an issue sometimes. Right now, I think the last I saw, the Saints are 3-point favorites, which again is kind of you get 3 points for being the home team. So it makes a lot of sense to me. That's kind of where I would the direction I would lean as well. Give me your prediction on this game, Wesley. How do you see this shaking out?
Yeah, I think I predicted it to be 31-17 Saints. I don't think we're going to keep scoring 40 a game, but I've seen too much the first 2 weeks to think that we're just going to fall off and, score 21. And I just do believe in what Dennis Allen's done with our defense about being able to make y'all one-dimensional. And if any team is made one-dimensional, Dennis Allen is a great defensive coordinator. Some people are just now starting to like him the last 2 weeks as the head coach. And I honestly think that both of our coaches, offensive and defense, are better than Nick Sirianni. And when this comes down to games coached against each other, I just really think that right now the talent's sitting on our side of the sideline.
I can't argue with any of those sentiments right now. So, folks, if you want to learn more about the Saints, check out the great Dome Patrol podcast, and you can also find out everything Wesley Coleman is doing about the Saints at his X feed at WhoDatWesley13. Wesley, thanks for joining me here on Eye on the Enemy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Any of you guys want to talk? You can tweet at me. We'll have a good time. We can have a conversation. I'm all for it. If y'all beat us, you can come talk trash.
Well, we will, no doubt about it. All right, I'll give you my prediction on this game in just a couple of minutes, but let's just kind of go over some of the slate here.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
On Sunday and Monday, the 1 o'clock window, the New York Giants are in Cleveland to take on the Browns. Browns 6.5-point favorites there. Got to take the Browns even with the points there, but picking straight up, obviously you're going with the Browns. A couple other games that we're keeping an eye on. The Chargers in Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. That's only a 1.5-point line. The Pittsburgh Steelers just 1.5-point home favorites. Justin Herbert and the Chargers looking pretty good last week. I would probably lean towards the Chargers here in this one. You've got the Packers in Tennessee taking on the Titans. Titans 3-point favorites, although it looks like Jordan Love is going to play. If Jordan Love plays, I think you got to take the Packers in that ball game. Let's see. Moving down the list here, that's pretty much it for the 1 o'clock window. You've got the Texans and the Vikings in there as well. Eagles and Saints, of course, in the 1 o'clock window. Colts and Bears. Colts 1.5-point home favorites. Chicago getting some respect. Only 1.5-point underdogs on the road. Interesting. I think I'd still pick the Colts to win that game, however, but interesting line there. In the 4 o'clock window, some more interesting contests here. You've got the 49ers in Los Angeles taking on the Rams. The Rams really dealing with a bunch of injuries right now. 49ers 6.5-point road favorites in this one. People are expecting San Francisco to bounce back after last week's shocking loss. I do as well, but I don't know if I have them covering that 6.5. So we'll check that one out. The Detroit Lions, a 3-point favorite on the road against the Cardinals. Again, Vegas expecting the Lions to bounce back. And then at 425, here's, I think, the outside of the Eagles Saints, the marquee matchup of the day. Ravens in Dallas to take on the Cowboys. The Baltimore Ravens, can you imagine them falling to 0-3? But that's what they're looking at. 0-2 heading into Dallas to take on the 1-1 Cowboys. The Cowboys fell to the Saints, as we talked about just a second ago with Wesley. So Dallas looking to recover. Both these teams coming off a loss. Ravens are 1-point favorites. 1-point road favorites going into Dallas to take on the Cowboys. And I'll go with the Ravens. I don't see the Ravens falling to 0-3 on the season. So that would be very good news for the Eagles if Baltimore can make that work out. Sunday Night Football, you got the Chiefs in Atlanta to take on the Falcons that we just saw. The Chiefs are 3-point favorites. Again, I was not terribly impressed by the Falcons. I didn't think they did a whole lot of things great. Kansas City should go into Atlanta and handle business there as well. On Monday Night Football, you've got two games, a doubleheader on Monday night on ESPN. You've got the Jaguars in Buffalo taking on the Bills. The Bills are 5-point favorites. Got to like the Bills in that one. Doug Peterson's Jaguars off to a slow start. And can we finally have a conversation about Trevor Lawrence being overrated and just not a terribly good quarterback? If not, when do we get to have that conversation? And then you have the Washington Commanders in Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. That's the game that's going to be on ABC at 8:15. So you've got it's not really Monday Night Football. It's, I don't know why this game is on Monday night, but Jaguars and Bills on ESPN at 7:30 Eastern. And then you've got the Commanders in Cincinnati taking on the Bengals. That's the primetime matchup, 8:15 on ABC. I'm sorry, America. You're going to be watching the Washington Commanders. Cincinnati should have no trouble. 7-point favorites against Washington, and I like the Bengals to win that game pretty easily as well. Which takes me to the Eagles and the New Orleans Saints. I wish I could tell you I had confidence in the Eagles to go into New Orleans, just 2.5-point favorites. So this is not exactly, I said 3 earlier with Wesley. ESPN has it at 2.5 right now. But it's basically like they're basically saying these two teams are pretty evenly matched. I don't think the Saints are going to score 40-plus points either. You can't do that each and every week. But I haven't seen a whole lot that I like from this Eagles defense, and they're going in and taking on the hottest offense in football. Alvin Kamara is playing better than he ever has. I don't know how they stop them. I don't know how they get off the field. I don't know how they force punts. I certainly don't know how they're going to force any turnovers in this game. I think the Eagles offense will look similar to what they did last week. They're going to run ball control. They're going to try and keep New Orleans offense off the field. They're going to try and eat up long 9-minute drives with a healthy dose of Saquon Barkley. I think you're going to see Jalen Hurts run again. And that is the underrated story from last week that nobody's talking about. Jalen Hurts looked phenomenal running the football. The burst was back. He didn't have that at all last year. Whatever gear he had on Monday night, he did not have in 2023, as we have talked about. He looked like 2022 Jalen Hurts running the football, and I thought he was fine passing the football last week too. I think there are certain guys and certain coverages and certain areas of the field he's just not comfortable putting the football, and he's got to get better at that if he wants to be back to being considered an elite quarterback in the league. But it was great to see him run the football. I think we're going to have to see more of that if this offense is going to move the ball down the field. The Eagles offense was stagnant until Jalen Hurts started taking off with his feet. And then the RPO game started working a little bit more, at least running the football. So we'll see if there's any more Kellen Moore wrinkles from the offense, but I don't see how they can keep up unless they just keep New Orleans off the field. And there's a little bit more tape about what the Saints are doing on offense that maybe Vic Fangio can exploit, but I don't feel good about the Eagles being the team to suddenly stop this red-hot New Orleans offense. I'm going to say New Orleans wins this game 31-17. I think that's the same score as Wesley. That score feels right to me. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this edition of Eye on the Enemy. I want to ask you to please check out all my stuff over at bleedinggreennation.com. And again, follow me on X at John Stolnis. And I would encourage you to check out the other podcasts we have here at the Eagles Pinpool Network. Make sure to stop by for our post-game show on Sunday afternoon that the boys will do. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week right here on Eye on the Enemy.